morning. We're in Shekalim Perek Beis. We learned yesterday Mishnah Gimel. We started Mishnah Daled. Today's shir is sponsored by the Elowat family of Springfield, Massachusetts, and of Ramat Beit Shemesh, our dear Shmuel Heath and his family, in honor of the 80th birthday of his father, Mordechai Ben Yoel, known as Papa Mickey. Admei V'Esem Shana to Papa Mickey, and Mazel and Broch and Atzlacha to the whole Elowat family. We're in Maseches Shekalim Perek Beis. We learned yesterday Mishnah Gimel upon Mishnah Daled. We're going to take a look today to briefly review and summarize what we learned yesterday in Mishnah Gimel by a chart. Your Mishnah Behira has a chart on page 11 and it goes through the halachas. The halachas basically dealt with two different cases that become four. There are two cases that become four. There's a case where a person has a pushka and he starts collecting money in his pushka that eventually he will trade in for Maktas HaShekel. So he puts a couple of frutot, he puts some agurot in his pushka and some agurot in his pushka, and at the end of the process he's going to exchange it at a money changer for Maktas HaShekel. So in one case the person says, Harei Eidol L'Shikli. The money I put into this pushka is for my Maktas HaShekel. The other language the person may say is She'ovi mehem l'shikli. From this pushka, I will bring money to the money change and purchase a Maktas HaShekel. The distinction between the language is clear. When a person takes money and looks at the pushka and says, this pushka is going to buy my Maktas HaShekel, and he ends up putting more than Maktas HaShekel in there, he goes to the money changer, and the money changer says, here's a Maktas HaShekel, and here's some of your agurot back. You had more than a Maktas HaShekel in there. That's one case. And that same case is true if a person says that from this box, I will buy a Maktas HaShekel. He goes to the collector. The collector says, you have a Maktas HaShekel, and you have also extra in there. Those are two cases that deal with shkolim. So in the case where a person says that from this box I will buy a Maktas HaShekel, he goes to the money changer and the money changer says, here's a Maktas HaShekel, and take some money back because you had more than the value of a Maktas HaShekel in it. Everyone holds, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai hold that you're allowed to take the change home. Your language indicated that you don't intend the whole box to be hektish. The person said, from this box, I will buy a Maktas HaShekel. So what is necessary from that box becomes a Maktas HaShekel. Anything that's left over after the Maktas HaShekel is purchased belongs to you. There's no argument there. However, when the person says, this box is going to be Maktas HaShekel, and he goes to the money change, and it turns out that he has a Maktas HaShekel plus 60 agurot. So now he has his Maktas HaShekel that's going to go to the Beis HaMikdash. What's the story with the 60 agurot? Beis Shammai says that the words he used was, this box would be for Maktas HaShekel. The fact that he put more than a Maktas HaShekel in there is a hektish b'to'us. He made a mistake. He said this box is hektish. He only intended it for the Maktas HaShekel, and he made a mistake and he put more than the value of a Maktas HaShekel in there. Beis Shammai holds that hektish b'to'us is hektish. It's hektish. The fact that you made a mistake and put too much in there, the money still goes to hektish. To what hektish? So that's the hektish of Nedava, separate box in the Beis HaMikdash. And with that money, they bought karbonis for Kayetz HaMizbeach. When the Beis HaMikdash didn't have karbonis being brought, the korban tomid in the morning is an obligation, the korban tomid in the afternoon is an obligation, and between those two karbonis, private Jews would bring their karbonis. Ola, Toda, Shlomim, Nazir, Chatas, Asham, Mincha, and for whatever reason, it's not a busy day, and there are no karbonis being brought on the Mizbeach. In order to show that the Beis HaMikdash is an active palace serving the Ribono Shel Olam, we make sure that there's always action karbonis being brought on the Mizbeach. So in a time where there's no karbonis being brought, there are animals that were brought for Kayetz HaMizbeach, and these were not obligatory karbonis like the korban tom in the morning and korban tom in the afternoon. These were voluntary karbonis that were brought simply to keep the Mizbeach occupied and busy with avodah. So this extra 60 agurot, Beis Shammai says, goes to the Beis HaMikdash, but into another pushka called Nedava. And from there, they will use the money to buy animals for the Mizbeach when the Mizbeach is, quote unquote, not in use. Beis Hillel says hektish b'toros is not a hektish. The extra 60 agurot you can take home because he never intended it to be a hektish. It's in there because you miscalculated or you didn't realize how much money was in there. It's a mistake, and when you make it hektish by mistake, it's not hektish. That's case number one. So let's look at the chart on page 11, the first line. Someone gathers money, collects money together slowly in order to put together Matzos HaShekel. And you have the first column, Hareelu l'shikli. He says, this box is for my Matzos HaShekel. What does Beis Shammai say when you say this box is Matzos HaShekel? Mosrom la'olos nedava bezman shamizbeach bodol. Beis Shammai says you have to bring the extra 60 agurot to the Beis HaMikdash, and it goes to a nedava. When the Mizbeach is not being used, that money pays for animals for the Mizbeach to have karbonis. The hektish b'tor shmei hektish. Beis Shammai holds hektish b'toros is a hektish. Next, Beis Hillel, Mosron chulin, the extra 60 agurot you take back home, it's chulin. His intention was to collect in the box a Matzos HaShekel. That was his intention. Anything above the value of a Matzos HaShekel was a mistake, and therefore a mistake is not hektish, you can take it home. That's the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, where a person says, Harei elu l'shikli, this is Matzos HaShekel. There's a machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Let's go to the bottom line of this chart. Sha'avi mehem l'shikli. Let's not concentrate right now on the word chatas. The person says, Sha'avi mehem l'shikli. From this box I will bring a Matzos HaShekel. There, even Beis Shammai agrees with Beis Hillel that you can take the 60 agurot home because your words were, from this box I will buy a Matzos HaShekel. Which means that anything that I don't need from the box for Matzos HaShekel belongs to me. So it says, Hamosa chulin, the leftover is now yours according to everyone. Because the words he used indicate that he only wants the value of a Matzos HaShekel to go to the Beis HaMikdash. From this box I will purchase a Matzos HaShekel. Which means once a Matzos HaShekel is purchased, whatever's left over is yours. But Hamosi Yeshalo, the leftover belongs to you. So those are two cases that deal with Shekalim. Harei elu l'shikli, this box is for Matzos HaShekel. There's a machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. A person says, from this box I shall purchase a Matzos HaShekel. Then there's no disagreement. Everyone holds you can keep the change. The next case is a chatas. Someone is required to bring a korban chatas, as we explained yesterday. And he's collecting money for his korban chatas. He can use the same two forms of sentences. This box is money for the korban chatas. Or you can say, from this box, I will purchase a korban chatas. So again, if he says, from this box I shall purchase a korban chatas, you're on the last line of the chart. He said, from this box I shall purchase a chatas. It's just as if he said, same rule from the case of Shekalim. From this box I will buy a Matzos HaShekel, which means the leftover is yours. From this box I shall buy a korban chatas. If there's any money left over, it's yours. That's clearly indicated in the language. Now, what happens if a person says, Harei elu lechatas? This box is going to be money for a korban chatas. This is different than the shekel case. In the shekel case, when a person said, this box shall be maktis a shekel, even if the 60 agurot left over after the money changer gives you maktis a shekel, Beis Shammai says it goes to the Beis Hamikdash for a nedava. Beis Hillel says you can take it home. It's a disagreement. That's because it's maktis a shekel. If a person says this box is to buy a korban chatas, and he goes into the marketplace and buys an animal for the korban chatas, and he has 60 agurot left over, there even Beis Hillel agrees that the leftover goes to the Beis Hamikdash for a nedava. Middle line on the chart, Harei lechatas, hamosel nedava. The extra 60 agurot go as a nedava to the Beis Hamikdash. Lefi she'en kitzvah lechatas v'yochel l'shtamish b'chol hamois ava chatas lefi kol hamois hekdesh. And this is the next Mishnah that we began learning yesterday. There's no basic. The amount of money that you have to spend on a korban chatas is unlimited. So when a person wants to donate a maktis hashekel, he says, this box will be maktis hashekel. Beis Hillel says, although it sounds like the whole box should be hektish, which is what Beis Shammai holds, Beis Hillel says there's a basic amount. Everyone knows the amount is maktis hashekel. It's a standard amount. So if somebody says this box is maktis hashekel, it's understood he only means maktis hashekel because the Torah says maktis hashekel. So when you say this box is maktis hashekel, you're saying I want it to be the Torah's maktis hashekel. Anything left over above that goes to you, back home. That's Beis Hillel. However, when you go into a marketplace to buy a korban chatas, there's no standardized price. You can go into a marketplace, buy an animal for 18 shekel, buy an animal for 5 shekel, buy an animal for 50 shekel. There's no standardized price. So therefore, when a person says this box shall be for a korban chatas, he goes into the market and buys an animal, and in his korban chatas pushka, there's 50 shekel. He spent 40 shekel on the animal. He has 10 shekel left over. Even Beis Hillel holds that money goes to the Beis Hamikdash as an adava, because when you said this box is for chatas, that means anything that goes into that box will be a chatas. The fact that you went into the marketplace and got an animal that doesn't cost that much doesn't make a difference, because your intention was that the box is a korban chatas. That's different than saying the box is a maktis hashekel, because maktis hashekel is a standardized amount. So those are the cases. A person can say, Harei elu l'shikli, this box is for maktis hashekel. Or a person can say, Harei elu l'chatas, this box is for a korban chatas. A person can say, from this pushka, I will buy a maktis hashekel. Or a person can say, from this box, I will buy a korban chatas. So you have 2 cases of shekel, 2 cases of chatas. In the case where a person says, from this box I shall purchase, anything that's left over belongs to you. If a person says, this box is a chatas, anything that's left over goes to the Beis Hamikdash. Those are cases where there's no machlokas. You can see that in the chart. The only case where there's a machlokas is if a person says, this box is maktis hashekel. There is no machlokas by the chatas case. There's no machlokas by the case where a person says, from this box I shall. The only machlokas we've learned about is where a person takes the box and says, this box is maktis hashekel. Beis Shammai says the leftover goes to the Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hillel says you can take it home because it's hektish b'tos. That's Mishnah Gimel. So we see that there's a difference between shekel and chatas. Where do we see the difference? By a person says, according to Beis Hillel, a person says this box is maktis hashekel. The 60 agurot left over you can take home. But if a person says this box is chatas, even Beis Hillel holds that the leftover 60 agurot go to the Beis Hamikdash. So on page 12, which we read yesterday, Mishnah Dalet, Amar Rabbi Shimon says, Ma ben shkolim lechatos. What's the difference according to Beis Hillel in the shekel case versus the chatas case? Again, according to Beis Hillel, this box is machzis hashekel, and there's leftover agurot in there, you can take it home. But if we say this box is for a korban chatas and there's leftover, you have to leave it for the Beis Hamikdash. What's the difference between those two cases, according to Beis Hillel? So the Mishnah says, Shekalim yesh lahem kitzvah. Shekalim has a set amount. So when a person says this box is machzis hashekel, he means machzis hashekel. It's a set amount in the total. Anything left over, it means he put it in the box by mistake. And Beis Hillel says a hektish by mistake is not hektish, take it home. But chatas ein lo kitzvah. Chatas has no set price. A person go into the marketplace and buy a chatas for 10 shekel, 18 shekel, 20 shekel, 40 shekel. So when the person says, if this box is chatas, the whole box is hektish. So if you buy the animal for 20 shekel, whatever's still left over goes to the Beis Hamikdash. Now we go to the new part of the Mishnah on page 13. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with this logic. What the ramifications of Rabbi Yehuda's disagreement here are is a question in the Mishnah. But let's just read Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer af l'shkolim ein lahem kitzah. Rabbi Yehuda holds even machzis hashekel has no standardized price. It has a minimum, but it has no maximum. What's Rabbi Yehuda saying? He's disagreeing with Rabbi Shimon's logic. Rabbi Shimon just explained Beis Hillel by saying, when Beis Hillel says this box is a machzis hashekel, it's set. Any leftover money, keep. But by chatas, Beis Hillel says, this is chatas, and you have leftover money, it goes to the Beis Hamikdash because a chatas has no set money. Rabbi Yehuda says a machzis hashekel doesn't have a set money either. It may have a minimum, but it has no ceiling, and I'll give you a proof. Now, before we give the proof that Rabbi Yehuda has, what is the ramification of Rabbi Yehuda saying? Rabbi Yehuda is saying that if the logic of Beis Hillel is that when you say this box is machzis hashekel, you can take home the change because there's no set number. I'm sorry, when you say this box is machzis hashekel, and you can take home the remainder because it's a set amount, but a korban chatas is not a set amount. That's what Rabbi Shimon says. So Rabbi Yehuda says, af l'shkolim ein lahem kitzvah. If the logic is, according to Rabbi Shimon is explaining Beis Hillel, if the logic is that the leftover from the chatas money, this box is chatas, anything left over goes to hektish. Why? Because hektish has no set amount. You can spend 20, 40, 60 on a korban chatas. It has no set amount of chatas. Rabbi Yehuda says a machzis hashekel has no set amount either, because it's possible for a person to give more than the value of a machzis hashekel. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says that can't be the logic of Beis Hillel. If the point of Beis Hillel is that a chatas you can spend as much as you want in the marketplace, therefore when you say this box is chatas, even the leftover money goes to the Beis Hamikdash. The same thing should be true by machzis hashekel. When a person says this box is machzis hashekel, you go to the money change and he says you have some leftover, that should also go to the Beis Hamikdash, because while there's a minimum for the machzis hashekel, there's no maximum. So therefore, machzis hashekel is just like a chatas. The same way you can spend as much as you want on a chatas, and therefore the whole box is hektish. The same thing is true of machzis hashekel. You can spend as much as you want, and therefore the rest of the leftover should go to hektish. So Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Shimon's logic. Now there is a big machlekes we're showing him here generally in machzis hashekel. In Parshas Ki Sisa, it says every Jew 20 and above gives a machzis hashekel. Now we learned the halachas, a Kohen, a Levi, a Ger. We learned all the halachas, women, men over 20. Whoever is required to give a machzis hashekel, the pasuk says, "Ha'ashir lo yarbe," a wealthy man cannot give more. V'hadal lo yamid, a poor person can't give less. So it sounds like nobody can give less than the machzis hashekel, and nobody can give more. That sounds pretty clear. And that, in fact, is the sheet of some Rishonim. Other Rishonim have a different explanation, and they hold, as we're going to see now in the Mishnah, that while you can't give less than the value of Moshe Rabbeinu's Machzis HaShekel, you can give more than the value of Moshe Rabbeinu's Machzis HaShekel, depending what time you live in. Rabbi Yehuda is going to make his point in a moment. But again, Rabbi Yehuda's point is, if the logic of Beis Hillel is that you can spend as much as you want on a korban chatas, therefore the leftover money in the pushka is all hektish, by the same token, you can spend as much as you want on a machzis hashekel, and therefore what's left over in the pushka should also go to the Beis Hamikdash, and yet Beis Hillel said what's left over in the pushka by machzis hashekel you can take home. So Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Reb Shimon's logic in Beis Hillel. Now what does Rabbi Yehuda say? How do I know you can spend more than the value of a Moshe Rabbeinu machzis hashekel? So Rabbi Yehuda says, Af l'shkolim ein lahem kitzur. Shkolim also don't have a set maximum. Shekshe'olu Yisrael min hagol, when the Jewish people came back from Golus Bovel, hayu shoyklim darkonis. In the first Beis Hamikdash, before there was any Golus, Klal Yisrael gave the regular machzis hashekel. They went to Bovel in exile. They came back from Bovel, and the ruling government, the rulers of the world, were Parasu Madai, Persian. The Persian coin was something called a darkon. And the way they would give their machzis hashekel would be they would give a half a darkon. A half a darkon is worth more than Moshe Rabbeinu's machzis hashekel. The point that Rabbi Yehuda is going to make, and he's going to continue making it, is that machzis hashekel means machzis hashekel shel oso medina. You give a half a shekel, the coin. The coin is half shekel of the coin that's used in that medina, even if the value of that coin is greater than the value of Moshe Rabbeinu's machzis hashekel. So if you take a look in the picture on page 13, they're showing you a darkon. A darkon, when they break it down, it shows you a sela. A sela means a shekel. It means a darkon, it's showing you a darkon has 2 shekels in it. 2 shekels means a darkon has 4 half shekels. The value of a Persian darkon is 2 shekel or 4 half shekels of Moshe Rabbeinu. When they gave machzis hashekel during this time in the second Beis Hamikdash, when the Persians ruled, and the coin that was being traded was a darkon, that was the coin. They then gave a machzis darkon to the Beis Hamikdash, because that's the half coin that's being used in the commercial market at that time. It's the machzis. In Moshe Rabbeinu's time, it was a shekel. You gave a machzis a shekel. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the coin being used was the Persian darkon, so you gave a half a darkon. Now, if a whole darkon is worth 4 half shekels, then a half a darkon is worth 2 half shekels, which means a half a darkon is worth a full shekel. So a half a darkon is a half of the commercial coin, but it is worth 1 full Moshe Rabbeinu shekel. So Rabbi Yehuda says in the second Beis Hamikdash, they were giving half a coin, but that half a coin had a greater value than Moshe Rabbeinu's machzis hashekel. So you see that while there's a minimum, there's no maximum. Example 1. So if a person says this box is machzis hashekel, and he goes to the collector and there's more money in there, it should go to the Beis Hamikdash. Because the same way by a korban chatas you can spend more, we see historically that people were able to spend more on a machzis hashekel depending where you were and what the coin was. Next example. Chazru lishkol sloyim. Then they went back and they went back to using sloyim, which means a shekel, and they went back to giving a machzis hashekel. Chazru lishkol sloyim still really means a shekel. In other words, they gave a half a selah, which is a machzis shekel. Sometimes the word selah means a shekel. Chazru lishkol tvaim. Then they went back to a coin at some point that was called tvaim, and they gave a half a teva, a half a tvaim, however, whatever the word is, and that was a Moshe Rabbeinu value machzis shekel. At any point, you see that Rabbi Yehuda is saying, look, the point is Moshe Rabbeinu's time, they worked in Shekalim. And the Torah says, give a half of the commercial coin called shekel, machzis shekel. That coin had a certain value in silver. That became the minimal standard. As Jews went from country to country, lo aleinu, in exile, or different governments took over, the coins became different. The point is that you took the shekel, or the coin, the matbea hayotze, the coin that is the official coin, and you give a half of that coin. As long as that half coin has the value of a Moshe Rabbeinu half. It may have more value than a Moshe Rabbeinu machzis shekel. So you see through history, the important thing was to make sure it's not less than Moshe Rabbeinu's machzis shekel, but it could be more. So if it could be more, when a person puts in a box money and says, this box is machzis shekel, the logic that Reb Shimon used by saying that there's a maximum and therefore anything that's left over should be yours because it's a mistake, Reb Yehuda disagrees with that. There's no mistake because there are plenty of times in Jewish history where a machzis shekel was worth more than Moshe Rabbeinu's machzis shekel, therefore there's no mistake. So Reb Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Shimon's logic in Beis Hillel. Ubikshu, the Mishnah says, lishkol dinarim. There came a point where the dinar became the going coin, and half a dinar, if you take a look, the picture keeps on breaking down the coins, picture 14, a half a dinar was less than the value of a Moshe Rabbeinu machzis shekel, and the Beis Din did not accept the half dinar. So that's less than Moshe Rabbeinu's half shekel, they don't accept it. But again, Rabbi Yehuda is pointing out we don't accept something that's less than the value of a machzis shekel of Moshe Rabbeinu, but there were times where we accepted more. So again, ein la kitzvah, it doesn't really have a kitzvah. Now you can't be obligated to that particular coin because the machzis shekel of Moshe Rabbeinu was not extant anymore. The coins, the ancient Roman coins, you can find them in ruins, but you can't do commercial transactions in Roman coins. Moshe Rabbeinu's machzis shekel, if they dig it up somewhere in a ruin, that would be an unbelievable find. But there's no Moshe Rabbeinu's machzis shekel anymore. So they had to. A machzis shekel means a certain value of silver that's in the half going coin of that country. We can't keep on trading machzis shekel or Moshe Rabbeinu because they're not around. Amar Rabbi Shimon comes back and responds to Rabbi Yehuda and says, Af al pike, nevertheless, yad kulam shava. It doesn't make a difference whether the half was more, the half was less. The point is, it's a half. It's a set number, machzis. And that distinguishes it from a korban chatas. When someone says this box is chatas, nobody knows how much that korban is going to be. You go into the marketplace, it could be a difference in a day, a difference in an hour, the price of animals go up, the price of animals go down. Nobody knows when a person says this box is chatas how much he's going to expend. Absolutely no one. There's no set amount whatsoever. Therefore, Reb Shimon continues to support his position that a machzis shekel has, that purchase of a chatas has absolutely no established number. On the other hand, by machzis shekel, yad kulam shava. Everybody is the same. Meaning, if I'm living in Eretz Yisrael during the time of the Persian domination over Eretz Yisrael, the going coin was a darkon. So I'm going to bring to the Beis HaMikdash half darkon. Just me? Every Jew who's living at that time that wants to donate a machzis shekel is going to bring a half a darkon. If I'm living in a time where there's again the value of pure Maktas HaShekel, everybody will bring a Maktas HaShekel. The point is, every Jew is going to be the same, Reb Shimon says. Yad Kulam Shava. Reb Yehuda, you are right, that during different times, the amount given to the Beis HaMikdash for Maktas HaShekel may have increased. But who did it increase for? Me? It didn't increase for me. It increased for everybody. If everybody's living under the Persian domination of the Beis HaMikdash, everybody's bringing a half a darkon. So while I'm collecting coins during this period of Persian domination, I'm putting money in my pushka and I say, this pushka is Maktas HaShekel. I come to the money change and he says, here's your half a darkon and change. That change is mine because it's a set fee. Now, it could be 100 years from now when the Greeks take over, or 52 years from now when the Greeks take over, the coin will be different. But right now, under the Persian domination, every Jew is going to bring a half a darkon. Anything above the half a darkon is mine. So Rabbi Shimon continues explaining Beis Hillel as the difference chatas is unknown, whereas shkalim is known. While different periods of time change the value of the Maktas HaShekel, the people living in a specific period of time are all going to bring the same thing, and therefore the same thing means what is left over is mine. Aval chatas, but by a korban chatas, zeh may be sel, v'zeh may be shtayim, v'zeh may be shalosh. In no comparison. A korban, Rabbi Shimon says, this one buys for $1, this one buys $2, this one buys $3. A Maktas HaShekel, every Jew is going to give the same thing based upon the coin that is being circulated in his time. Mishnah Hey. We now come to some very interesting halacha since we're dealing now with leftover money. A person says, this box is Maktas HaShekel. Beis Hillel says, what's left over is yours. Beis Shammai says, what's left over goes to the Beis HaMikdash because Hektish B'Torah says Hektish. A person says, from this box I will purchase a Maktas HaShekel. Everybody holds leftover belongs to you. If a person says, from this box I will buy a korban chatas, everybody holds the leftover belongs to you. Person says, from this box is a korban chatas, everybody holds the leftover is the Beis HaMikdash. So we're dealing with these cases now of leftover money. That was money that seems to have been donated for a cause. The cause is taken care of. Now there's leftover money. So there are cases like this. There was a case recently like this where money was being raised for a particular purpose. Okay. There was a couple getting married recently in Ramat Beit Shemesh, and people were being contacted to donate money to help them buy a refrigerator, oven, stove, basic appliances that the family couldn't afford. And they put together money, and then they collected so much money that it was more money than they needed to pay for the appliances. There was a person in charge of this collection, and the couple picked out their appliances, and this person went to the store and paid for the appliances, and it turned out that there was quite a bit of shekel left over after all the appliances were paid for. What do you do with that leftover money? That leftover money was collected as stucca for a particular purpose. That stucca purpose has been satisfied. What do you do now? Let's say 100 people donated to the cause, and there's still 500 shekel left. Maybe we should give back 5 shekel to each person. What do we do with the leftover money? And this comes up in a lot of contexts. Pidyon Shvuyim. Money's being collected to pay the ransom to free a Jew that's been taken into captivity. The email goes out that we need this money, etc. The Goyim want $100, and the person who's in charge of the Pidyon Shvuyim collects $300. He takes the $100, he pays it to the Goyim, the Yid Baruch Hashem is free. What do you do with the extra $200? Who does it belong to? Where does it go to? Do you give it back? Next mission is going to deal with all these rules of collections that have leftover money. And a lot of these halachas are nageya today, depending upon a certain circumstance, which we'll see in the mission. Moisar shkolim chulin. This is Beis Hillel. If a person says, this box is shkolim, or from this box I will take over I will buy a Maktas HaShekel, and it turns out there's leftover money, your money. Chulin belongs to you. Moser asira se'efa. Now here's a rule. Anything that's in any way connected to a korban chatas or a korban asham, we just learned about chatas. If someone says this box is chatas, or it says this box is chatas, even Beis Hillel says the leftover goes as a donation to the Beis Hamikdash for Kayetz HaMizbeach. Why? Because there's no set sum for a korban chatas. So anything that deals with a chatas is going to have the leftover go to the Beis Hamikdash. We'll talk about the appliances in a few minutes. First, let's finish the Mishnah. Mosar asir ha'efa. There's a korban called a korban olaviori. Generally speaking, olaviori means it goes up and down. It's the end of Parshas Vayikra. In Parshas Vayikra. If a person, chas v'sholom, was v'chal Shabbos b'shogeg, in the real shogeg, we're not talking about a person walked into the room and flipped the light switch on. People call that a shogeg. That's not, depends how he did it, what he did it. Usually a shogeg in terms of a korban chatas means that a person walked into the room and thinks it's Sunday. And a person goes out into his garden. He woke up in the morning, he thinks it's Sunday, goes into his garden, he starts pruning his trees. Oops, now he realizes it's Shabbos. So he knows you're not allowed to prune trees on Shabbos. He went into the garden, he thought it was Sunday. He has to bring a korban chatas. Or he went into the garden and he knows it's Shabbos, but he never learned that you're not allowed to prune a tree on Shabbos. He brings the korban chatas. But if a person knows it's Shabbos and knows you're not allowed to turn on electricity on Shabbos. He knows it's Shabbos, he knows he can't do that, but he did it by mistake. He went into the room and out of habit, he flipped the switch. He knows it's Shabbos, he knows he can't do it, and he flipped the switch. That's not a case of a korban chatas. Case of a korban chatas means a helam. There has to be something forgotten in your mind. Either you forgot at Shabbos, but you know you can't do this, or you forgot at Shabbos, but you know what you're doing, you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, you just forgot at Shabbos, or you know it's Shabbos, but you forgot. Question is, did you ever know? You forgot that you're not allowed to do this on Shabbos. You bring a korban chatas. That is a regular korban chatas. An animal. There are certain cases where the Torah has something called an olaviore. The person has to bring a korban chatas based upon his financial situation. The Shabbos example has nothing to do with your financial condition. The korban chatas has to be an animal. You have to borrow money, you have to raise the money, you have to get a korban chatas. There are certain korbanos that chatas, certain things a person does where the Torah is more makel. And the Torah says, if you're a wealthy person, your chatas is an animal. If you're not so wealthy, your chatas can be birds. If you're dalei dalus, if you're very, very poor, your korban chatas in these limited cases can be a mincha, a flour offering. So we call this the chatas ole, it goes up, v'yored, it goes down. It's a sliding scale. How much money do you have? So asiris ha'efa. So if you take a look in the left-hand column of the Rabbeinu Ovadia at the top, asiris ha'efa shemakriven b'dali dalus. This amount of flour is brought by a poor person, dali dalus, a very, very a very, very poor person. He did one of those limited avevis by b'shogeg, for which he can bring a flour offering. And what he does is he puts money into his pushka and he says, I'm saving money to buy the flour. And it turns out that there's more money in the pushka than he needs. He goes to the marketplace, he buys the flour, and he ends up with a couple of extra agurot. The agurot, because it's related to korban chatas, it goes to the Beis Hamikdash as an adov. Mosa kine zov and kine zovos, kine yoldos, chatois vashomois. The bird karbonas, the kinim, that a zav, a woman who gave birth, a korban chatas, a korban asham, mosreim nedava. All these cases that have anything to do with a korban chatas or a korban asham, the leftover money is going to go to an adava. Zehaklal, this is the rule. Kol shubal l'shem chatas l'shem ashma. Anything that's brought, that any money that's collected by a person to be able to buy a chatas or an asham, not only an animal chatas or asham, it could be a bird chatas. It may even be the flower offering chatas in those cases of Ola V'Oreh. The rule is, it goes, leftover money is going to go to the Beis HaMikdash. Moser Ola, La Ola. Somebody says, I'm going to bring an Ola, and he says, this box is for my Ola money. And there's leftover money in the box after he buys the animal. So it's like a korban chatas, really. There's no set price for an Ola. He breaks open the box. He's got 20 shekel. He buys an animal for 15 shekel. He's got 5 shekel left over. That is hektish money, because there's no set price like a maktas shekel. So the leftover money also has to be used to buy another Ola. It goes towards another Ola. It's hektish for Ola. You spend 15, 5 shekel left over for another Ola. Moser mincha. Someone says, I'm going to bring a mincha offering to the Beis HaMikdash, a flour offering, not for a chatas. A person can donate a mincha. And he collects the money in the box. He goes out, he buys the flour, leftover money. With the leftover money, he has to buy more flour. Moser shlomim. He says, this box is for shlomim. I'm going to bring a korban shlomim. He buys the animal, there's leftover money. L'shlomim. He has to use the leftover money to buy another korban shlomim. You can't switch shlomim to ola to shlomim. The leftover money has to be the same thing. Moser Pesach. This is a very interesting case. Person puts money together in a box. He says, this box is my money for korban Pesach. He goes into the marketplace, he buys his animal, and now he's got leftover money. He has 20 shekel in the box, breaks open the box, buys a korban Pesach for 15 shekel, there's 5 shekel left over. He can't buy a second korban Pesach. He can't bring 2 Pesachs. You can only bring 1. So in the case of shlomim, you can bring 2. In the case of an ola, you can bring 2. In the case of a flour offering, you can bring 2. So the leftover money, shlomim left over is another shlomim. Ola money left over is another ola. Flour offering money left over is a flour offering. But Pesach leftover money, you can't bring another korban Pesach. So the rule is Pesach, Moser Pesach, the leftover money that you have from korban Pesach, with that you buy another animal, and it's a korban shlomim. The Gemara learns this out from a pasuk that leftover money from a Pesach goes to korban shlomim. Mosar Nazirim LeNazir. Now here's where we get into the distinction. People put money together. A bunch of people want to pay for the karbanos that a Nazir has to bring. A Nazir, after his 30 days, Baruch Hashem, everything went well. He didn't become Tameh, Baruch Hashem. 30 days are over, he comes to the Beis HaMikdash, there's a set of korbanos he has to bring. And let's just we're making this as a case that a bunch of people decided that they're going to be Nazirim. This is not the facts, it doesn't have to be the fact, I'm just making up a case. A bunch, 10 people in Ramat Beit Shemesh say, we want to be Nazirim, we want to lift ourselves up, lift up the community, we want to practice Naziris for 30 days. 10 people do that. The community is so excited that they have 10 holy Nazirim in Ramat Beit Shemesh. The Ramat Beit Shemesh raises money, and they say, we want to pay for the karbanos of all 10 Nazirim. So they send out the email, they send out the SMS, the text, they send it out. Everybody was so privileged to have 10 Nazirim in Ramat Beit Shemesh. The 30 days is over. None of them became Tomei. None of them drank wine. We're so proud of our 10 Nazirim, we've decided to pay for their karbanos. Everybody starts sending in money, and you end up with $1,000. Go into the marketplace, all the 10 Nazirim go into the marketplace and they pick out their animals. All the animals are picked up. The gabbai of the $1,000 comes to the marketplace and says, what's the bill for all these karbanos? He says, $890. You pay it. You have $110 left over. And this $110 was collected for karbanos for a Nazir. But all the Nazirim are taken care of. All the 10 Nazirim are taken care of. And the money was designated for karbanos of a Nazir. So the Mishnah says, Moiser Nazirim, the leftover money that was collected for other Nazirim, la Nazirim. It goes for collections for future Nazirim. If there's another Nazir in Maseches Shemesh, or 2 or 3, or in Yerushalayim, or you hear about in Beersheba, there's a Nazir, you take that money and you buy karbanos for other Nazir. It's carbon Nazir money. A different case. Moser Nazir. Let's say I take upon myself to be a Nazir and I start a pushka collection. I put money in there, and at the end of my 30 days, I break open the pushka, I go into the marketplace, I buy my animals for my carbon Naziris, and lo and behold, I have extra money. What do I do with that extra money? That goes l'nedava. That goes to the Beis Hamikdash for a nedava, for the Ketz HaMizbeach. When the Mizbeach is empty, we buy animals with that money to keep the Mizbeach working and operating in God's palace. So if the money is collected for Nazirim, people are collecting not for themselves, they're collecting to pay for other Nazirim, and there's leftover money. The leftover money remains with the collector or the gabbai until it can be used to pay for other Nazirim. If I put away money for myself, for my karbanos Nazir, then it's the old rule. The leftover money goes to the Beis Hamikdash as an adova. Moser Aniyim, you collect money for poor people. Just a general collection. Kupa Shel Tzedakah, we're collecting money for poor people. I'm leaving out the word poor because that may have a different rule. The Kupa Shel Tzedakah sometimes has a campaign for XYZ. And that's not a good example because the Kupa Shel Tzedakah is such a general collection that whatever they collect for, if anything's left over, it goes into the general Kupa, and we all understand that. But let's say someone says, I'm collecting for 4 poor families, and I'm collecting to pay for their Shabbos food. I need $100 for each of these families to pay for 3 sudot. I need $400. He ends up buying the 3 sudas for the 4 families, and he only spends $350. Moser Aniyim, La'aniyim. The extra $50 he keeps, doesn't give back to the people who gave it to him. He keeps that money, and he buys more food for Aniyim. Different case. Moser Ani. A person comes around and says, I'm collecting for Mishpachat Reuven for this Shabbos. I need $100 to be able to pay for their 3 sudas. And this person who's collecting the money, the collector, collects $120. He goes out, he buys the food, or he collects the 100 and the food only costs 80. Either way, he has extra money. He goes out, he collects 120. He buys the 3 sudas for 100. He has $20 extra, but that $20 extra was given for what purpose? Not for general collection for poor families. The collection was for Mishpachat Reuven. La'oso ani. That extra $20 goes to Mishpachat Reuven. It was collected for their food for Shabbos. Their food for Shabbos was paid for. If there's any extra money, you're going to give it to that particular ani. It was particularized. If you're just collecting for aniyim, there's extra money, then you wait until you can give it to aniyim again. If it's collected for a particular person, a particular cause, more specifically a person, causes are going to be different, particular person, then the person gets what's ever left over. So if you go back to the case of the refrigerator and the freezer, at this point, People, the appliances for the chasna and kala. Okay, we raised $1,000. The appliances were $890. We have $110 left over. The money was collected specifically for this chasna and kala. They got their appliances, and they should be getting the $110 as well. Until we come to a little condition, which we'll see in a few minutes. Moses shvuyim l'shvuyim. A general collection is made in a community. We want to have in our community treasury money collected for pidyon shvuyim. Baruch Hashem, there are no Jews in captivity, but chas v'sholom, if a Jew gets captured, we don't want to start walking around and making a collection. If the goyim say we're going to kill him unless you give us $100, we don't want to have to start contacting people by emails, and it'll take days to put the money together. This guy's life is in danger. So we want to have a kupa shel pidyon shavuyim in our town. They collect money, and moiser shavuyim, they use the money for pidyon shavuyim, and there is leftover money l'shavuyim. It has to be used for the general purpose of nebuch, if there are future captives, for those future captives. Mosar shavui. What happens if the gabbai goes around collecting and says, Nebuch Reuven was captured by goyim? We need $100 to redeem him. And he collects the money. And he ends up, people put money in the pidyon shvuyim pushka to save Reuven. There's $120 in there. He gives the goyim 100, and Moiseh Shavu, Loiseh Shavu. And Reuven, when he's redeemed, he's going to get that $20. That $20 was donated for him. There's some extra money there, and it belongs to him. Mosar HaMesim LaMesim. They collect in the city a certain amount of money for being able to bury appropriately people who never die without money to be able, the family doesn't have money to bury them properly. So a collection is made, and they bury these people. Obviously the same rule. The leftover money after they've buried these people, if there's still leftover money, the money is going to be for Loyalenu in the future when people in the city need to be buried and there's no money. These halachas, if they're general collections, it remains general collections. Particularized, it goes to that person. Same thing here. Moser Hames. Lo'aleinu, Reuven died. People go around collecting and say, Reuven didn't leave money to pay for a mokum kavura. We need to collect money now. We have to bury him. People start giving money and money and money, and you collect $100. You go to the Chevra Kadisha, and they say the plot is $80. So you have $80, you pay for the plot, Reuven's buried, there's $20 extra now, Li Yarsha. That $20 really belongs to Reuven, but Reuven never died, so it belongs to his Yorshim. Same thing like an ani. You collected money for a specific ani, there's leftover money, it goes to the ani. You collected money for a specific mace, there's leftover money, it goes to the Yorshim. Reb Meir Oimer, now the Tana of this sheet holds, if you take a look, we'll take a look at the Rav in a minute, Machol mes liziluse legabi Yorshim. We understand that if Reuven died and he hadn't bought a plot in his lifetime, he didn't leave money to buy a plot for himself. And the Yarshim, Nebuch, don't have money to buy a plot. There's some embarrassment for the collector to say, we bought the plot for your father, Reuven. There's some extra cash. Here's the extra cash. It's a zalusa. It's embarrassing to the Yarshim. Not only couldn't they pay for the kever, they're getting now extra money from the community collection that was supposed to go for the kever, but there was leftover money. Is that something that we do or not? Because we really collected for the mess. We collected to bury the dead person. Is it something that's shameful to the dead person that not only did we buy the kever, which we have to, there's no other way to do it. The family doesn't have the money to bury him. So we buried him. But is it a shame to now walk over to, is it a shame to the mess? We're worried about shaming the mess. Is it now a shame to the mess by going over to his Yorshim and saying, here, we paid for the kever, and here's a couple of dollars left over from the collection? The first sheet holds that it's not shameful to the mess. And therefore, the leftover of the collection from the burial for Reuven, you can go over to the Yorshim and say, here's some extra money that was collected from the burial, it's yours. Reb Meir disagrees. He says, Moser Hames, the leftover money that was collected after you paid for Reuven's burial, that money should be kept in a place. It's a concept we find, especially in Bava Metzia. The money should be left till Eliyahu Hanavi comes, he'll tell us what to do with it, because Rabbi Meir is besuffic. He's doubtful. He doesn't know whether the proper attitude is that we assume the mess, Reuven, is not being shamed by this, or is in fact Reuven suffering shame by now giving the Yorshim the money. Therefore, he says, I'm not sure which way the halacha should be. Should we give it to the Yorshim, not give it to the Yorshim? So we're going to put the money away till Eliyahu comes. Eliyahu will tell us what the halacha is. That's the second sheet. Rabbi Nosson says, Moser Hames, the leftover money from the mess, that's all we did is we buried Reuven. Now, if the family didn't have money to bury him, they don't have money to buy him at Seva either. So Rabbi Nosson says, Moser Hames, the leftover money from the collection for Reuven's burial, you don't give it to the children, because Rabbi Nosson is the opposite extreme. He says it is a shame. You're shaming the mess by giving collection money to the children. Bonin lo nefesh al kivra. This is the lashon of Chazal. We call it today a matzeva. Chazal called a matzeva a nefesh. You build a nefesh, you build a matzeva on Reuven's kever. So we have three opinions here. Reuven Nebuch died. He didn't buy a kever. He didn't leave money for a kever. His family doesn't have money for a kever. We make a community-wide collection. We pay for the kever. Now there's leftover money from the collection. The first opinion of the Mishnah is give the leftover money to the Yarshim. It is not shameful to the mess, to Reuven. We're worried about Reuven. He died, but we're still worried about him. It's not shameful to him to give the leftover money to his Yarshim, so give it to the Yarshim. Reb Meir says, I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether the halacha condones such a thing, whether it is shameful to the mess or not shameful to the mess. Leave the money to Eliyahu comes. Rabbi Nosson is the opposite extreme of the Tana, the first sheet. He says it is definitely shameful. Do not give the money to the Yarshim. Do not leave it till Eliyahu comes, because it is shameful. That's the way halacha looks at it. It's shameful. So what should we do with leftover money? Build a matzeva, use it for Reuven. It was collected for Reuven, use it for Reuven. Do not give it to the Yarshim. Do not leave it for Eliyahu. There's no doubt in my mind you're shaming the dead person by now giving the money to the Yarshim, which demonstrate that the Yarshim, hey, you have no money, you're a bunch of poor people. Build a matzeva on the kever. Now, let's take a look at the Rav on page 15. In the right-hand column, right where the Rav lines get wide, page 15 in your Mishnah Behira. This is the condition that we were talking about. The Talmud Yerushalmi and the Talmud Bavli prove the following point. If you have a set Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, there's a concept that's also developed at the end of Megillah. Under what circumstances can you sell a shul? You're not allowed to really sell a shul. Can you sell a shul? What do you do with the money when you sell the shul? You sell a shul and you build a new shul and there's leftover money from the sale of the shul. What do you do with the leftover money? These questions come up, and they definitely come up today all the time with selling shuls. And Rav Moshe Negus Moshe has many tshuvas, several tshuvas about selling shuls, leftover money from shuls, what can you do with shuls, but there's a concept called Shiva Tuvei here. The 7 representatives of the city. The number 7 is not an absolute number. It's something that was the minhag at that time. A community would get together and elect 7 people to represent the community. And these people responsible for the shul, for collections in the community. It's what we call today probably, you have to look at the Moshe's Igros Moshe about this, board of directors. A shul has a board of directors that were elected, and this board of directors is entrusted with certain authority. Does that board of directors have the authority to sell a shul? Well, first of all, you have the halachic issues, and then in certain states, especially from what I understand, New York, there's the New York nonprofit corporate law, which deals with selling, which would include selling shuls. And there's all kinds of things that have to be done in order for the sale to be valid in the civil law. But in halacha, we have a concept of shiva tuvei ha'ir. These are the people responsible, they're elected representatives of the shit. Or could be a specific one person who's been designated by the city. You are going to run the city. You are the mayor. Okay. One of these 2 cases, we have a 7-member board of directors elected by the Jews in the city to run the affairs of the Jewish community, or one person who's been designated, he's the mayor of the Jewish community. V'nira be'enav l'shames moise shivuyim oy moise aniyim oy moise meis l'mashir be'enav yochel l'shanes l'hoitzi b'mashir be'enav shutzarech shavei moichem b'yadai v'chein moirin tomid halacha l'maisa. The Rav says this is the halacha l'maisa. You collected money for an ani, specific ani, and you have left over. You collected money for Reuven's family for Shabbos. He needs money. You collected money for the Chas and Kala, they need appliances. You collected money for Reuven Nebuch, he died, you're going to bury him. Any of these cases. Or you collected money to redeem Reuven from his captivity and his leftover money. In all these cases, we learned that because it's particularized, the leftover money to redeem Reuven belongs to Reuven. The leftover money that you collected for a specific ani goes to the ani. The leftover money that you collected for a mace and you paid already for his kavura became a machlokas. What do you do with the money? All of these cases, it says in Bavli Yerushalmi, the 7 board of directors of the city or the designated mayor of the Jewish community, when there's this kind of leftover money, the board of directors or the mayor, depending upon what the community decided how they're going to function. Are they going to want a board of directors or a designated mayor? That person, that mayor, or that board of directors can use the money for whatever he sees necessary at the time. So let's collect money for this couple. They need appliances. And this is done under the auspices of the city board, the Jewish board of directors that's running the Jewish community, or the Jewish mayor that's running the Jewish community, either way. The collection is done. They collect $1,000. The mayor or member of the board of directors goes to the appliance store, he pays $890 for the appliances. We learned earlier that the $110 goes to the young couple. However, that board of directors or that mayor of the city has the power, that's part of this system of how the city community works, that they have the power to use extra money from such collections and put it to what they see is necessary in the city. So it could be they have $1,000, they bought the appliances for $890, there's $110 left over, and the mikveh of the city needs to be fixed. The board of directors or the mayor can determine that the $110 is going to be used to fix the mikveh. That's a power inherent that the community gives the mayor or the board of directors, that if there are public collections and the purpose for which the collection was made is satisfied, leftover money is in the discretion of the board or in this mayor, and that, the Rav says, is the halacha. Okay, Mi'at Hashem, tomorrow we'll start Perek Gimel, And we're going to start, Perek Gimel begins, B'shloshim Prokim Bashana Tormes Alishka. We're going to now learn, we've mentioned it several times, 3 withdrawals a year were made from the treasury room in the Beis Hamikdash to take care of the Beis Hamikdash and Karbonis. And we're going to learn what days those withdrawals were made, and we're going to learn how the withdrawals were made and accounted for.